Okay, hello, we are back. So, we're gonna continue with Stone Flower Part 2. Okay, but you know the drill. First voice warm ups. Okay, let's practice.
Right? Tragedy, strategy, tragedies.
Hello, good morning to you.
What do you like? What do you do? What do you do? Hey, it's Hadar. Today I'm going to share with you the ideal morning pronunciation practice. You want to think of it as a physical workout or a yoga practice that you do in the morning to get energized for the day, but also to build muscle. And this is exactly the same thing, but in this case we're talking about the articulation organs. You want to do that in the morning to set yourself up for pronunciation success, but also to build the muscles of your articulation organs like the tongue and the lips and the jaw. Now, I recommend doing it every single day so you're more in control of the sounds that don't exist in your native language, but it's also going to help you sound more clear in your native language as well. You can do it in the morning, but you can also do it before going into a meeting or before having an important speaking gig. Okay, let's get started. But before that, if you are new to my channel, then hi and welcome. And this is the place for you if you want to speak English with clarity, with confidence, and freedom. So be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notifications so you don't miss out on any valuable lesson. Let's begin with massaging your jaw. It's always good to become aware and kind of like relax all unnecessary tension. We're going to start with that and end with that. There is a muscle here at the jaw hinge that connects between the upper jaw and the lower jaw, and usually we hold a lot of tension there. So I want you to massage it and kind of like try to release all the tension and maybe hum. We're also warming up the voice, so you don't have the morning voice. And here, the cheeks, and again the jaw. Maybe move it around a little bit with your hands. Okay, a little more. Okay, good. Now we're gonna warm up the tongue. Let's begin by sticking the tongue out, and we're gonna move it to the right and then to the left. To the right. We're gonna do this 10 times. Okay, so right, right, left. Okay, now we're gonna stick the tongue out and bring it up and down. So stick it out and Keep doing it. I'm going to keep speaking. Again, push it out as if the tongue wants to come out of your mouth. 2 more. And very good. Now let's stick it out and bring it back in really fast 10 times. As far as you can. Okay, good. Let's release tension and blow your lips out. Okay, good. In the next exercise, we are going to clean the teeth with your tongue. So you want to move your tongue around. Keep doing it. Now, this is a really good exercise, especially before a meeting. So you make sure that you don't have green stuff or poppy seeds stuck between your teeth. I got you covered. Keep your lips closed. Good. Relax your lips. Good. Now we're going to use the tongue to massage the inside of the cheek as you're resisting the tongue with your cheek muscles. So take your tongue, the tip of the tongue, and push it against the inside of your left cheek while the cheek is actually resisting it. So you want to push against. You want your tongue to feel like it's fighting something as you're massaging it. And get to all the different places inside your mouth. And to the right. Good. And now let's do a trill to relax the tongue. For some of you, this is going to be really easy if you have the trilled R in your language. If you don't, you can just do another lip trill. And now we're going to do it while going up and down in pitch. Massage the jaw a bit more. Very, very good. You're starting to feel your mouth, to feel the tongue, which is good because we need the tongue to articulate the sounds, and to be able to do it clearly, we need to be in control of the tongue. Now we're going to warm up the lips. So push the lips forward as if you're pushing it for a kiss, an exaggerated one, and pull it to the sides. Forward. Now try to keep the cheeks out of the way, right? You don't want to go like this. Okay, you don't want to get used to engaging your cheeks when pulling the lips. Sometimes we need that to articulate some of the sounds, like the E and the A, and we want to be able to control these muscles. So just the lips, the corners of the mouth, and forward. One more time. Okay, very good. Make sure you're not holding tension in your shoulders. If you do, just tell your shoulders to relax. Tell your face to relax. Okay, good. Now we're gonna go into a few sounds. Let's start with the tip of the tongue consonants. Let's begin with the T sound. Ta 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 ta. Make sure it's just the tip of the tongue touching the upper palate. Ta 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 ta. Da 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 da. Na 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 na. La 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 la. Let's do it together. Ta 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 ta. Da 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 da. Make sure it's light. Na 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 na. La 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 la. Ta 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 ta. Da 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 da. Na 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 na, la 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 la. And now we're gonna move the tongue back a bit and switch between S and Z. Now we're gonna move on to consonants created with the lips. We're gonna start with a P sound where you bring the lips together and release air. P p p p p p p. And then the voiced version of it. Ba 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 ba, and then we're gonna go to the nasal version of it. Ma 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 ma. Pa 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 pa. Ba 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 ba. Ma 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 ma. Again. Pa 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 pa. Ba 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 ba. Ma 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 ma. Let's add vowels to it, and we're gonna use the consonant M. Ma ma my. Ma ma my. Ma my. So we're going into an I diphthong. You want to drop your jaw and then raise the tongue for an E sound. Ma my. And then we're going to go into ma may. Okay? Now we're going into the A as in day diphthong, starting with an E, shifting into an E. Ma may. Then we're gonna do a long O as in go. Mama mo, mama mo, mama mo. Good. The next diphthong is going to be mama moy, mama moy, mama moy. Oi as in toy. Mama moy, mama moy, mama moy. And finally, we're gonna use the ow diphthong. Mama mow, mama mow, mama mow. Just like in mouse. Mama mow. So we're going to do all 5 of them, one after the other. Mama my, mama may, mama mo, mama moy, mama mow. Let's do it again. Mama my, mama may, mama mo, mama moy, mama mow. One last time. Mama my, mama may, mama mo, mama moy, mama mow. Very good. Now we're going to move to the back of the mouth, pronouncing the k and g. From there, I want you to shift to the high E sound. G-g-gee, g-g-gee. So the tongue pulls back for the g, and then forward for the high E. G-g-gee, g-g-gee. And then k-k-key, k-k-key. Good. So let's do it a few times. G-g-gee, k-k-key, g-g-gee, k-k-key. And then from there, we're going to move on to the tense oo sound, a back open vowel sound. G-g-goo, g-g-goo, k-k-koo, k-k-koo, g-g-goo, k-k-koo, g-g-goo, k-k-koo. Make sure you push the lips forward for the oo sound. Let's do it 2 more times. G-g-goo, k-k-koo, g-g-goo, k-k-koo. Very good. And now I want you to yawn. Kind of like raise the soft palate by yawning. Good. And let's find the voice and bring the voice to the chest. Hello, hello, good morning. Hello, hello, good morning. So you want to bring your voice to the chest. Hello, hello, good morning to you. Hello, hello, good morning to you. And then let's bring the voice to the head. Hello, hello, good morning to you. Hello, hello, good morning to you. You want to feel the vibrations here? Maybe a little bit to your nose.
Hello, hello, good morning to you. Hello, hello, good morning to you.
Okay, let's move on to some tongue twisters. Let's start with my favorite, unique New York, unique New York, unique New York. Let's do it again. Unique. High oo, high e, unique New York, unique New York, unique New York. Let's say it again a little faster. Unique New York, unique New York, unique New York, unique New York. Now, as you're moving through the days, if you do it every single day, you'll see that it's a lot easier for you to say it faster. The next one is good blood, bad blood. Good blood, bad blood. The good has that back open as in book, cook, and look. And the blood has a cup sound. Good blood, good blood. I hope you can hear the difference. Bad blood. Here we have the as in cat, a forward front vowel. Bad blood. Good blood, 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 bad blood. The next one is tragedy, strategy. Tragedy, strategy. Strategy, tragedy, 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 strategy. Good. I used to confuse this one all of the time. Let's do some TH warm-ups. So let's start with just sticking the tongue out and pronouncing a voiced TH versus a voiceless TH. Now we're gonna work on transitions. N to TH. L to TH. You can also use the voiceless TH. Very good. And now STH. Make sure you stick the tongue out. The tongue is not too tight against the teeth, so the air comes out. Let's do it a few more times. Very good. Relax your lips. Release air. And massage your jaw again. Good. Very good. Finally, let's do some chunks. What do you? What do you? What do you, what do you, what do you, what do you, what do you? What do you, what do you, what do you, what do you, what do you? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you like? What do you like? What do you like? What do you like? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say? Next one is going to go. Gonna go, gonna go, gonna go, gonna go, gonna go. Gonna go, gonna go, gonna go, gonna go, gonna go. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go. She's gonna go, she's gonna go, she's gonna go, she's gonna go. I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go to the office, I'm gonna go to the office, I'm gonna go to the office, I'm gonna go to the office. Next one is could have. Could have, coulda, coulda, coulda. Coulda, 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 coulda. Notice that the D is really, really light. It sounds like a flap T, like a ra, like an R in Spanish. Ra, pero, coulda, coulda, coulda. I coulda, I coulda, I coulda. I coulda, I coulda, I coulda. I could have done that. I could have done that. I could have seen it. I could have seen it. I could have been there. I could have been there. I could have done it. I could have done it. I could have seen it. I could have seen it. I could have been there. I could have been there. Coulda, 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 coulda. Shoulda, 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 shoulda. Should have. Shoulda, 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 shoulda. Woulda, 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 woulda. Would have. Would have. Woulda, woulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Okay, that's it. To wrap it up, I want you to put your palm on your belly, one on your belly, one on your chest, and try to breathe into the hand that is on the belly. And breathe out. Close your eyes. Breathe in to your belly, not to your chest, and breathe out. And last time, and as you exhale, you can also release a sound. Breathe into your belly. Okay, that's it. As I said in the beginning, I recommend doing it every single day. And when you do, you will feel the improvement and how easier it is for you to articulate sounds in English and in your native language as well. Now, to make it fun and to hold each other accountable, every time you complete this exercise, write in the comments, done. So we know that you did it again today. Have a beautiful
Thank you. Lagging. No, it's not. It's lagging. No, it's not. Part two. Let's do it. Part 2. David Cade lay on his stomach on a pile of sandbags which formed one of the walls of a redoubt on the Kimberley perimeter, and stared through his prismatic glasses into the shimmering heat haze of the desert. He saw before him a flat plain broken up by low hills, the surface of which was reddish sand. The only vegetation consisted of small karoo bushes, each one growing a yard or two from its neighbor, which gave the landscape the appearance of smallpox. It was a sun-stricken, cruel picture, and as though to add to that dimension, half a dozen vultures planed across the deep blue sky landed awkwardly and began to feed on the carcass of a dead horse. The siege of Kimberley had lasted almost 2 months. It was mid-December, 1899, and the hottest time of the year. David raised the glasses past the dead horse and focused on a tonga, a dry watercourse about 2 miles away. Occasionally he had seen movement there. He swept in a semicircle, but nothing moved now. Everything seemed dead, as though the besieging Boers had decamped in the night, leaving the town to its own devices. But he knew that this was not so, for when the Boers chose to be, they were invisible. They could fade into a landscape as well as any antelope. They were out there, and as though to confirm this, he heard the sudden boom of a gun, then some seconds later the whiz of the shell. He put his head down and covered it with his arms. The shell exploded somewhere in the town behind him. He looked at his watch. It was 3 o'clock, and the afternoon shelling had begun. The Boers had ringed the entire town with their new 15-pounders, excellent weapons bought in Europe and manned by crews of German and French mercenaries. Over the past weeks, a pattern had developed. On 6 days a week, they shelled the town for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, usually from 3 to 5. But on Sundays, the Boer generals, being devout Calvinists, would allow no shelling, so Kimberley had a peaceful day. David heard a gun crash just below him. The Kimberley artillery had opened up in reply. It was a useless exercise, for the town weapons were only 7-pounders and did not have the range of the Boer guns. All their shells dropped short. It was more a gesture of defiance than anything else. He saw a movement away to his right, close to another of the sandbag forts placed on the perimeter of the town, and a party of horsemen came riding by. He had no need to look through the glasses. They were close enough to be seen clearly. There were 10 or a dozen men, well mounted and well armed, wearing the flat-sided hats of the colonial police, light fawn shirts, brown jogged purse, and shining leather riding boots. At the head, with a yellow scarf knotted round his throat, rode Jack Farson. These were the Kimberley Blazers, a motley collection of ex-diggers and old pals whom Jack had formed at his own expense into a private cavalry unit, supplying them with horses, uniforms, and rifles in the same way the C.J. Rhodes had formed the Kimberley Light Horse. But where Rhodes' unit had been created for self-aggrandizement, Jack's had come about as a result of his attempts to get through the Boer lines and bring back his daughter. At first, he had assumed that the regular army would help him, but they had refused to be dragged into a personal problem, even when the problem concerned so important a figure as Farson. Jack had rounded on them, called them cowards, hurried them, and generally made such a nuisance of himself that Colonel Kakowich, the garrison commander, and now, since martial law had been proclaimed, the most powerful figure in Kimberley, had threatened to have him imprisoned for sedition. Jack had then hired a few men and tried to force his way through the lines, only to be driven back by Boer sharpshooters. He had decided he needed more men, and these were easily recruited because he was offering good money. When he had gathered a force of 20, he tried again. This time he lost 2 men and had a horse shot out from under him. He had been arrested by Colonel Kakowich, held for 24 hours, then released with the warning that if he continued to try to fight his personal battles in the midst of the siege, he would be court-martialed and shot. So he had given up for the moment, but had used his energies to build up a force that he believed would eventually be big enough to be beyond the power of garrison control. His official excuse was that it would augment the regular troops defending Kimberley. The Blazers actually contributed little to the military presence, David thought, spending much of their time in the cozies and canteens, getting drunk and boasting about what they would do if the Boers ever mounted an attack on the town. But in one way he was thankful for them, for they gave Jack an interest and something to do. The tension between the 2 men had never been fiercer. They had met soon after Jack arrived, in Dan Halket's house, neutral territory, to discuss what was to be done about Jewel and Michael. The conference was, considering the circumstances, surprisingly calm. Each man had some understanding of the other's point of view. David was able to put himself in the position of a father with an 18-year-old daughter, and Jack realized David's concern for his son because he had gone through a similar experience when Jewel had diphtheria. But that was as much as mutual compassion allowed. Jewel had run away from home to follow Michael, and this Jack could not countenance. But as it turned out, events had overtaken them. Neither man could influence a war, and their inability to solve their problems in the midst of the larger one had led to an artificial situation. They felt embarrassed in each other's company, so after the first meeting, they avoided each other. Kimberly was a big enough town by then to make this possible. David had moved into Hellcat's house. Jack remained at his hotel, and they kept out of each other's way. Now, from his position on the walls of the redoubt, David watched the Kimberley blazes canter past and disappear from sight. Just one more aberration of the strange siege. Kimberley had changed almost out of recognition since it had first started up as a mining camp in the late 60s and early 70s. After Cape Town, it was now the second largest town in the Cape Colony, with a population of 45,000. Of these, 25,000 were white, a good proportion being Boer sympathizers, and the remainder were black mine workers and half-castes who worked as waiters, cleaners, servants, ostlers, and at all the other jobs which white men would not perform. The tin shacks and clapboard dwellings had given way to good brick-built public buildings and solid bourgeois houses. There was an old Kimberley now around the Big Hole, and a new Kimberley comprising a group of suburbs with such names as Beaconsfield and Kenilworth. But it was still a mining town. Most of it was owned by C.J. Rhodes, whose three mines, the Kimberley, the De Beers, and the Wesselton, dominated world diamond production. The rest by new chance. It lay 640 miles from Cape Town and 485 miles from Port Elizabeth and less than 10 from the border of the Boer Republic of the Orange Free State. A railway line ran north from Cape Town and passed through Kimberley on its way to Bulawayo in the newly named Rhodesia. This too ran close to Boer territory and had been blown up within the first few days of hostilities. So had the telegraph. Kimberley was isolated, cut off, remote, but it was also the world's biggest diamond producer, and the British government needed it. A relief column under Lieutenant General Lord Mattoon had started northward soon after the war began and should have been in Kimberley weeks ago, having swept the Boers before it. But the painful fact was that it hadn't. The siege was something of a joke. There was no shortage of food or drink. Business went on as usual. The Boers shelled and killed very few people and did little damage to property. There were 10 to 15 seconds in which to take cover after the bang of the gun was heard. In 1 week, more than 700 shells were fired into the town, and only one black woman was killed. Pieces of the shells were highly prized and readily sold as souvenirs. Unexploded shells fetched £5 each. There were 600 regular troops, a mixture of mounted police and gunners, in Kimberley, plus the Kimberley Light Horse and the Kimberley Blazers, as well as a town guard to which David, like all able-bodied men, belonged. Occasionally a mounted attack was made on the Boer positions, but these were discontinued after heavy casualties. It had not taken the town long to become used to the conditions of the siege. At first, there was a water shortage, and people filled their baths and watered their gardens with shaving water and washing up water. But then Rhodes arranged for an underground stream in one of his mines to be pumped into the town and there was as much free water as anyone needed. If there had to be a siege, people said, then this was how they liked it. Another shell went whizzing over David's head. Again he ducked, pulling his Panama hat over his face. He turned and saw it explode somewhere near the hospital, and his thoughts turned to Lily, who was nursing there. Although the casualties were light, the Boer guns were firing at the town in general, and nothing in particular. Lily had as much chance of being a casualty as anyone else. It was a strange time, he thought. A war brought happiness to some and disaster to others, and there was no doubt it had brought happiness to him. David occasionally had news of Portuguese Place and of Michael from black servants who penetrated the lines, or from Boer sympathizers living in Kimberley, who moved with greater freedom than anyone else. Nothing, he heard, gave him cause to worry. The farm, he supposed, was as safe for a non-combatant as anywhere else, and Michael was said to be making the same good progress. So, he had been able to allay his fears about his son and allow Lily to become the center of his thoughts. She had arrived in Kimberley just before the siege began, to give her promised farewell recitals. Peter Arendt had been due to follow a few days later, but by that time the railway line was cut and the town encircled, and she was in the trap. David no longer questioned the morality of his position. Michael was recovering, and the guilt he had felt after returning to London from Amsterdam had vanished. Lily had taken a suite at the Prince Albert Hotel, and that was where he spent much of his time. Though as far as the town was concerned, he was staying in Dan Halkett's big house in the suburb of Beaconsfield. As the sun dipped down towards the western hills, his tour of duty came to an end, and he began to walk across town towards the New Chance mine to see Halkett, as he did every day. The heat was still severe, and he jumped onto a horse-drawn tram. People seemed cheerful, although some of the women looked worn. They were city people, he thought, people who took trams and cabs and lived in brick houses. It was a far cry from the early days. Dan's office was on the sunny side of the main building, and the shutters were closed against the last of the day's heat, making the big room shadowy and soothing to the eyes after the harsh light into which David had been staring. It was a Spartan functional room, the only ornaments being models of some of the best diamonds to come out of the New Chance mine. Against one wall was a glass cabinet, in which was part of the pump which Franz Talport had brought up from the coast of all those years ago, and which had been the real start of New Chance. It still bore the name The Invincible, G.A. Gwen, Hammersmith, London, on a shining brass plate. The two men took up the day-to-day business of the mine. The first problem was coal. The stocks had dwindled to almost nothing. "We've got to keep enough to run the lifts," Dan said. "Otherwise we can't get into the shafts for maintenance work. We could shut down completely. We practically shut down already. It can't be long before we're relieved, and then the railway will be open again. How are we off of food?" David was thinking of the hundreds of black miners in the compound who needed to be fed whether they were working or not. I laid in a big stock," Dan said, "but I think we're going to have to start slaughtering the horses." "Will they eat horse?" "We'll all be eating it soon." David pulled a face, and Dan said, "I've eaten it when times were rough. In a stew, you'd hardly know the difference. It's only the English who make a fuss. I still don't like the idea. Well, there's something else. The military wants us to move the dynamite. We've already moved it once. It was now kept in a stone-built store impervious to 15-pound shells. Yeah, they're still not happy. Where will it go? Number 1 shaft. By the time we get it down there, the column will have arrived. Any news of it? They refer to the relief column every day. Dan shook his head. Rhodes has been trying to signal to them with a searchlight at night, but no one knows if the messages get through. We did have a runner in, though. From the column. Yeah, the pun down by the Boers and on the Mother River. They thought they'd just come marching up, huh? As if the Boers were going to sit back and let them. They say Methuen has never been in battle before. Anyway, we got some post. A letter from Snell. He drew a sheet of notepaper towards him, looking slightly embarrassed. Is anything wrong? You read it. David read the 2-page letter. Marie Farson had asked Snell for money, and when he had questioned her about the dividends she should be getting from New Chance shares, she had professed to know nothing about Jack's financial affairs. He gave her an allowance. That was all. Snell had begun his own investigation and found that Jack was almost bankrupt. Huge sums had been spent on the Sussex estate, the house in Park Lane, and various gambling debts. He's been spending money like water, Dan said. And he's running around here with his own private cavalry. That's costing him a fortune, too. I know. What are we going to do? David paused, then said, Don't do anything yet. Let him have what he wants out of my account. I'll think about it. He left Dan about 7 and walked 2 blocks to the Prince Albert Hotel. Because of his wish to avoid gossip on Lily's behalf, he always went through the charade of asking the desk clerk to send a servant up to announce him. She was standing by the window in her room, wearing a lacy gown which moved slightly in the evening breeze. As always, he was struck by her beauty, the expressive face, the black shining hair, the red lips, and the soft roundness of her body under the filmy gown. She kissed him, then inspected him at arm's length. You look tired. It's the heat. I'm not used to it anymore. Any news of the column? Still the same. The Boers have them pinned down. What have you heard at the hospital? There's a rumor that there have been talks between the military and the Boers. One of the doctors said he'd heard that if Kimberley fell, all the Englishmen would be shot, and the woman given to the blacks. That's just propaganda. I hope so. What would you like to do? I'm told you can still get a decent meal at the Great Northern. It's too hot to eat out. I was going to have a bath. The Prince Albert was a new hotel, and Lily Sweet had its own bathroom. Hey, I'll scrub your back, he said. No, thank you. Ladies don't look their best hunched up in baths. Okay. Leave the door open so we can talk. I'll have something sent up. And a bottle of cold wine, she said. I need it after today. He sat near the window, loosened his tie, and removed his jacket. He should have been content, but wasn't. He had begged her to live with him in Dan's house, but she had been adamant, and grudgingly, he supposed she was right. She was loved in Kimberley. That had been plain from the moment she arrived. There had been a crowd at the station to meet her, and a crowd outside the hotel when she moved in. The first 2 concerts had been packed out, with people standing at the rear of the hall. He could understand she would not want anything to Martha's. What had really made the town her slave was that within a week of knowing she would not be able to leave until the siege was over, she offered her services as a nurse. Since then, she had done everything from washing bed pans to helping the surgeons cut off gangrenous limbs. In spite of the fact that the siege was relatively mild, diseases like enteric fever, typhoid, and dysentery were beginning to be seen, and it was not only British casualties with which the hospital dealt. Most of the doctors on the Boer side were Americans, Germans, and French. If a Boer was badly in need of surgery, he would be brought in under a white flag and operated on in Kimberley. "Are you still there?" Lily called. "Yeah, I'm still here." "You're very quiet." "I was thinking." "About what?" He was going to say us, but that was something they talked about endlessly, with no solution. Instead, he said, "There's trouble with Jack." "What sort of trouble?" He told us the gist of Snell's letter. She was silent for a while. Then she said, "I should be surprised, but I'm not. He was never a man to keep a pound note in his pocket." David remembered what had happened to the first good diamond they had found. "Is he still coming to see you at the hospital?" he asked. She nodded. "Almost every day. It's embarrassing in front of the doctors. They think there's something between us. And of course, there are still people who remember us in the old days." A shadow seemed to fall between them, and he was silent. She emerged from the bathroom wearing the same filmy gown, which now stuck damply to her body. "We were different people then," David said at last. "Why don't we let him know about us? That would stop him." "I don't think it would. He seems so strange. He's drinking heavily, and I'm frightened of him. At first he talked a lot about Jewel, but now—" There was a knock at the door. Lily glanced at David and called, "Who's there?" Jack's voice answered, "It's me." It was very loud. "What is it?" "Let me in." "I've told you. Have you got someone there?" The words would be echoing down the corridors. "Of course not." She indicated the bedroom, and David went in, leaving the door slightly ajar, which enabled him to see most of the other room. Lily opened the outer door. "I thought someone was with you," Jack said. "I was having a bath." He looked around suspiciously. Then he noticed the damp patches on her gown, and David saw him eye her hungrily. Oh, yeah. Hungrily. She drew the edges of the garment closer together. "I ask you not to come here," she said. "I know, but what harm is there?" "I don't like it." "We're old friends." "More than friends." "That's enough, Jack." David felt himself flushing with embarrassment and jealousy. He hated hiding like some musical lover. Yet he respected Lily's wish for their affair to remain private, or as private as was possible in a place the size of Kimberley. "Aren't you going to invite me to sit down?" "No, Jack. We could have a bottle. We could have a bottle sent out." "What about dinner?" "Don't you understand? I don't want you to visit me here." She moved to the door. "And you coming to the hospital too often." "You said I could visit you there, but not every day." "Lily, you don't understand." No, I don't. You listen to me." He held up a hand. All right, Lily. Anything you say. We'll do it your way." With that, he was gone. Lily went to David in the bedroom. "I am so sorry," she said, taking his hand. "Yeah, that sort of thing makes me feel dirty." "I know." Hmm. I get anxious when I have to read the dialogues between the two characters. It's like you have to show a kind of emotion, and I don't know how to do that, so it comes off awkwardly. Okay, 427. Ooh. I'll be right back. The bomb. Oh, oh no. Okay, we back. Just had to make myself some tea for the throat. Oh crap. Let me charge my. Yeah, just for you. Thank you. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Okay. Okay. He left early that night, taking a horse cab through the barricaded streets, having to show his identification pass every few hundred yards. Dan was nowhere in sight when he reached home, and he assumed he was in bed, for he retired early and was up early. The house was large and double-storied, set back in an arbor of fruit trees and vines. The servants let David in, and he went up to his room. He sat on the bed for a long while. Sooner or later, Jack would have to know about him and Lily, and that would provoke whatever must eventually happen between them. The icy coldness that had existed between them since Jack's arrival could not last forever. Jack never came into the office, never discussed business, spent his time riding awkwardly around the town with his cronies, visiting one canteen after another. Lily was right. He had changed. There was something alarming about him. David went to a small office safe he kept in his room and opened it. The Southern Cross lay on its bed of black velvet. It was set as a single pendant on a gold chain and looked more beautiful than ever. To hold it and gaze at it gave him intense pleasure. He always marveled at the loveliness of the stone that seemed paradoxically to combine cold and heat. But now he found its beauty was no longer sufficient. It needed pale skin to frame it. It needed to be worn. It needed Lily, just as he did. A few days later, he was in Dan Halkett's office discussing what was to be done about water seepage and whether they had enough coal to run the big steam pumps when Jack burst in. He was dressed in his cavalry uniform, holding a riding crop in one hand and swaying slightly. His face was congested as his eyes read. Before he opened his mouth, David could smell whiskey. "Well, this is cozy," he said. "What is it? A meeting of the management?" "You forgot me," David said. "There's water in number 2 shaft. We're discussing pumping it out." "That's a bloody big decision," Jack said with heavy irony. "They'll stop the Boers and end the siege. I've got news for you. There's something being done that will help to end it." "What's that?" Dan said coldly. "C.J. Rhodes is building a gun." "Building a gun?" Dan said. "Yeah, Labram's making it." George Labram was Rhodes' mining engineer, an American who, like Dan Halkett, could turn his hand to anything. "What sort of gun?" A bloody great gun, a 30-pounder. Not like these damn pop guns we've got. Something to plaster the bullets with. They looked at him in silence. Then David said, "Well, good luck to them." "Is that all you can say?" "Christ, all you're doing is lying up on those sandbags all day watching Johnny Boer. At least Rose is doing something. And so am I, with the blazers. You're like an old woman. Where would we have got in the old days if you'd been like this?" He flung out of the office, and they could hear his booted feet crashing on the stairs down to the street. David was not the only one to whom the war had brought solace. Susan was finding happiness as deep as she had ever known. The farm was isolated from events in Kimberley. There were no more lost days, for now she was kept busy helping Jewel. Her granddaughter had taken over the running of the house. Michael's health had improved to a point where she could hardly recall the gaunt, hollow-eyed figure who had arrived from Victoria. He ate well, slept well, and his coughing had almost stopped. With Susan's active help, he was taking an increasing interest in the farm. He had read some of the old books on farming which Franz had collected during his lifetime, and would often question her on things he did not understand. One day, when she had not seen him for several hours, she found him near the gate in the home camp, mending a fence. He was pulling on a strand of wire, straining it to the fence post, and the sweat was running off his face. For a moment she was alarmed, but he looked so natural and strong that instead she said, "There are a lot of fences in need of mending." "I know. When I've done this, I'll do the ones at Crucifix Camp." On another occasion, after some of Lessing's cattle had broken down a fence and come onto Portuguese Place, she found Michael repairing the damage with Hans at his side, helping him. She thought what a strange war this was, when a man could come home to mend a fence, or milk a cow, or bring in the harvest, and then go back to take up the fighting where he had left off. But it was apparently happening all over the country, as the peasant army fought close to its roots. They saw little of the war, but occasionally they would hear what was happening from their neighbors and from Hans. Part of the time he was with his Boer commando, and on the Kimberley perimeter, part of the time on the farm doing jobs that neither his wife nor young children could manage. "One good push and it would all be over," he said of the siege. "What then?" Michael said, thinking of his father, a picture rising in his mind of medieval sieges in which the townsfolk were put to the sword after the invaders had come through the walls. "Nothing," Hans said. "All we want is to close the mines. We've got nothing against the people." "You know, they're saying that you're going to shoot the Englishman and give the woman to the blacks," Susan said. Hans looked at her. "Do you believe that, Aunt Susan?" "Of course not. The English don't fight fair. Have you heard what they do to the waterholes?" "No." "Some of them have been poisoned. That's bad for us. We have to use them for our stock and our horses. We can't travel in the desert without waterholes. Now we have to leave men to guard them, and we can't spare the men. Remember that when they talk about giving white women to the blacks." She watched the two men. They got on so well, and yet she supposed they were enemies because their races made them so. It was symbolic of what was happening all over the country. One day, this question came abruptly into the open. Hans rode in by himself. He was dusty and sweat-stained, and and there was a bitter look in his eyes that had not been there before. Susan gave him coffee, and Jewel brought a plate of rusks. Michael, who had been milking, came onto the stoop with a bucket of fresh milk. "And Susan, will you look after Suzette and the children when the time comes?" Hans said abruptly. Suzette was his wife. "When the time comes? She's not." "No, but they're taking women and children to camps." "Who?" "The English." He glanced at Michael under his heavy brows. "Are you sure?" "They say the camps are crowded. People are dying like flies." Michael said, "There are always rumors in war. We'd never do that." "We?" Lessing said. "I mean, is that how you feel?" "Of course not. It slipped out. It isn't that way at all." "Except—" "What?" Michael shook his head. "I was born here, like you." "But you wouldn't fight for us." Michael hesitated. "I have thought about this. It's not that I wouldn't fight for you. It's that I wouldn't fight against them. They're my people too." It was a dichotomy that was to overtake many in the years to come. "You can't have one foot here and the other in England," Lessing said, and turned to leave. Susan walked with him to his horse. "Don't worry about Suzette and the children," she said. "Tell her to come as soon as she likes." "We can't hold the British army forever," he said. "When they break through, they'll round up the women and children and burn the farms. You'll see." "Perhaps the stories about the camps are only rumors. Perhaps Michael's right," she said, and saw a shadow pass across his face. "Remember, his father is trapped in Kimberley. He could be killed at any time." "Any time." As the summer deepened and the heat grew more intense, the land dried up and the river dropped away to a trickle. But the big pools held their levels, and Susan would go down with Michael and Jewel in the late afternoons and sit in the shade by the breakfast pool. "This is what we sometimes talked about in London," Jewel said. "I could never believe it would happen. Seeing the two young people together gave her more pleasure than anything else." Sometimes when she stood on the stoop and watched Michael walk up from the river or along from the home camp, it was as though she was seeing France coming in from a day's work, as though the years had fallen away. But the ideal could not last. The country was at war, and war finally came to Portuguese Place. Susan was dreaming a dream one night, a dream she had not had for a long while. Once, when the memories on which it was based were fresh, she had dreamt it frequently. She was enveloped in something white, amorphous, amorphous, like a cloud, like a cloud. And then the blurred image cleared, and she was in the wagon and the witnesses with the canvas sailcloth. She was looking through the opening at the back, and horses were there jingling their bridles and stamping their hooves, and the Hottentots were there, and one of them was choking Mr. Parker. Another was coming towards her wagon. She could see the greasy locks, the ring in the ear. She had a shotgun in her hands, but when she pulled the trigger, nothing happened. The Hottentot came on, laughing at her. She woke, sweating and rigid. And then came the even worse nightmare of reality. She could hear the sounds from a dream: horses' hoofs, the clattering of harnesses, and something heavy grating over rocky ground. She rose, put on a gown, and took the shotgun in her good arm from its place above the living room door. She went quietly past Michael's room and Jules' room and made sure their doors were closed. She went out of the house and saw flaring torches down by the old cattle kraal. It was bright moonlight, and she stood in the dark shadow of the house. She could hear voices and again a jingling of harness. The sounds were coming from her right, from the track that ran above the old servants' quarters. A team of mules came into view, pulling a gun so big that it dwarfed the animals and the man who walked beside it. They began to maneuver it on its great wheels into the kraal, pulling away part of the walls which were of cut thorn bush. "Halt!" a voice cried, and for a moment the flickering torches were still. Susan had moved closer and by the torchlight was able to see the lettering on the gun barrel. Schneider Creusot at sea, Savenay at Loura, France. She looked at the men closely. There were 5 of them. 4 were dressed in formal military uniforms, although of differing kinds. The 5th was a Boer in his farming clothes, carrying his bandolier of bullets. One of the gunners, for she assumed the uniformed man to be artilleryman, was a sandy-haired giant in a dark uniform and knee-length black leather boots. He directed operations in English, but with a heavy accent which Susan could not place. The man began to cover the gun with the old dead thorn branches. The big man turned to the Boer and said, "Are you sure this place is deserted?" "Yeah, that is our information." Susan knew the Boer's accent was that of someone who spoke Dutch as his home language. She was an old mad woman. She was an old mad woman. She died. They piled the thorn branches around the gun until it was camouflaged. Then the sandy-haired man said, "We will eat, and then we will sleep in the house." Susan stepped into the light of the torches, holding the gun loosely in her hand. What do you want on my farm?" she said, letting her voice rise. Everything stopped. The big gunner turned and moved towards her, taking off his cap. "Madame," he said, "who are you? We thought this was an empty place." He looked meaningfully up at the Boer seated on his horse, and Susan saw anger on his face. "It is not empty," she said. "Now I can see that." She was aware of the other gunners moving behind the big man. "I asked who you were and what you wanted." "1,000 pardons," he said. "Bengtsson, captain in the Royal Swedish Artillery." He brought his heels together and bowed. "These are my men." The torches had been brought forward and she could see him more clearly. He had a large flat face with light eyebrows and light lashes. His tunic was unbuttoned at the neck, and she could see fair skin covered with a sheen of sweat, for the night was hot. His 3 men closed in behind him. They were very different, whereas the Swede carried an air of authority and the manners of an officer. These looked like savages. The hair was matted, the uniforms torn, and they were streaked with grease and dirt. The Boer dismounted and said, "My name is Smith. I asked you what you wanted." The Swedish captain said, "Oh, you are English. American. So, it is strange for an American to be here, yes? No stranger than a Swede. You still haven't told me what you want." "You saw what we were doing." "Of course. We must rest here 2 days, perhaps 3. Here?" We were told it was deserted. You were told wrong. It happens in war. You cannot stay. I understand how you feel, madame, but there are no buts. I'm an old woman, alone here, but I can use this. She lifted the shotgun. I have farmed here for more than 30 years. I say who stays on my farm and who goes. Huh. You force me to ignore you, madame. He put his cap back on his head and said, We have come a long way on this mission. We are tired and we are hungry. Perhaps you have food. He had already walked past her and was making for the house, followed by his men. She lowered the gun, unable to use it. You must be proud of what you're doing, she said bitterly to the Boer, who looked unhappy and truculent. We have orders. Susan hurried after them. Somehow they had to be stopped from discovering Michael and Jewel. I have food, she called. Bankston paused, nodded. Good. We will eat whatever you have. You can't sleep in the house. There is only my room. The others are broken down and filthy. Cannot, Bankston said. There was a coldness in his tone that frightened her. First let us eat. Then we will discuss what happens next. He was about to go into the house when she said, It's cooler here, indicating the stoop. They sat on the benches and chairs around the heavy table which Franz had made. Do you have wine? One of the gunners said. She looked at him. He was small and dark, with a shaven head which showed a scar running above his left ear. His accent, she thought, was French. No, she said. Cognac? I have no ardent spirits. She heard a noise from inside the house. She froze. She tried to block the doorway with her body, but it was too late. Michael, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, was standing in the living room. What's happening? He said. With one fluid movement, the big Swedish gunner was on his feet and had drawn a heavy revolver from the button holster he wore on his belt. Come out, Bankston said. Come out of there. He turned to Susan, mimicking her. I'm an old woman alone here, huh? He said to the small man with the shaven head. Serge, you and Manuel search the house. Wait, Susan said. It's not what you think. I wasn't trying to lie. This is my grandson, Michael. He's an invalid. He has consumption. The word as applied to Michael seemed ludicrous. He stood in the lamplight, the very picture of rustic health. I have seen cases of consumption, Bankston said. He's recovering. But from what? From a journey, perhaps? Which journey? Michael said. Where would I be traveling to? Are you an American? Bankston said. No. English? He's my grandson, Susan said. An Afrikaner. I think you are English, Bankston said. And I think you have come from the relief column to spy out the land. Now, madame, is there anyone else in the house? Susan stepped back into the doorway and loudly said, There are only the two of us in the house, myself and my grandson. Bankston smiled. Serge, Manuel. The two darted past her like whippets. She turned to Smith. For God's sake, my name is Susan Delport. My husband was Franz Delport, a good Boer. Have you heard of him? Nope. The Lessings and the Jordans. They're my neighbors. They can tell you who I am. Don't you know the Lessings? He looked confused. I know of a Lessing. Hans Lessing. Yeah, Hans Lessing. He's our neighbor, our friend. Ask him about us. She heard a scuffle behind her, and the two artillerymen came into the living room with Jewel. She was dressed only in a nightgown, and with the lamplight behind her, her young body was plainly visible. "You pigs!" Susan said. She pushed past, went to Jules' room, and brought her a robe. "Well, this is a great pleasure," Bankston said. Jules seemed to realize immediately what was happening. She stood calmly between Susan and Michael, tying the rope and lifting her hair from the collar. "This is my granddaughter," Susan said. "You had no right to go to her room." "Ah, the granddaughter," Bankston said, the disbelief obvious in his tone. "First the grandson, then the granddaughter." He turned to Jewel. "Is it mademoiselle or madame?" "It's miss," she said firmly. Just then the third gunner, a stern German called Hoffman, came out with 2 bottles of brandy. Susan was genuinely surprised. They were part of a stock which Franz had bought, and she had forgotten. Bankston pulled the cork from one and drank deeply before passing it on. "Smith?" he said, but the Boer shook his head. "Smith is not a drinker, are you, my dear Smith?" Then he said, "This is very interesting, madame. You have told me 3 things only, and they all have been lies. Why, I ask myself, unless you are enemies?" Susan said nothing, for there was nothing to say. She had put the shotgun down in the living room, and now she wondered how long it would take her to reach it. "And now we have a problem," he went on. "You have seen what we have been doing." His eyes shifted to Joel. All 4 men were looking at her. Only Smith kept his eyes to the ground. Bankston looked back at Susan. "You said you had food. Please, fetch it." Susan stood her ground. "Now, madame." "I'll need help. Jewel will come with me." "Jewel? Huh. That is an unusual name. Jewel. But I think not. No, Jewel will not help you, nor will your grandson. I would like him to stay where I can see him. Hoffman can help. He's a good German boy." Hoffman said, "I found the brandy, Captain." "That's true. You go then, Smith. You don't drink." Susan went into the small room at the back, which she and Jewel had made into a kitchen and storeroom. Her body was shaking. The nightmare had returned, only this time it would happen to Jewel. The damage would be more to her. She was 18. Susan had been in her 30s when she had met the Coronas. Jewel came from the protected atmosphere of London. Susan had come from a country not too dissimilar to the one in which she now lived. Smith came in behind her. "What is happening here?" she hissed. He wore the same confused, unhappy expression on his face. He was about 20, a large, overgrown boy. "What are you doing here?" she said again, this time in Dutch. His expression changed to one of surprise. He was young enough to be her grandchild, and Boers were respectful to their elders. "We'll use the gun to make Kimberley flat," he said. "But why bring it here?" "The ammunition wagons had broken down. We must wait for them 2 or 3 days. Meantime, there's no one to guard the gun. If the English knew, they would bring men out and blow it up." "And you think we could get a message to them?" she said scornfully. "That's what they think, Aunt." Damn. I am balding. Oh wow. That was just another human being that I find. It's gonna take a massive hit. Okay. Okay. I'm back. Whew. Where were we? Where were we? Where were we? And I've got a lot to go. Man. Okay. She clinked plates and banged cups to cover their conversation, but her eyes bored into his, and she said, "Do you know what's going to happen to her?" He shifted his feet without speaking. "If those men spend 2 or 3 days here, what do you think will be left of us?" She paused. "They will rape my granddaughter. Be certain of that." He flinched as though she had struck him. "And then they will kill us, so no one will be left alive to tell what happened. And you are going to see it all. You are going to see them hold her down, perhaps tie her legs about. For God's sake, Aunt." That's how a woman is raped. They either hold her legs or tie them. Sometimes they threaten her with a knife or choke her, and they bite her breasts. Sometimes they cut them. Please, for God's sake. Sometimes they hit her in the face and she loses teeth. Sometimes they smash her nose. His lips were trembling and he was swallowed. That's what you will see, Smith. And if you see it and you do nothing, then you're part of it. Do you think I'm lying? He shook his head. No, Aunt. Tears came into his eyes. They did it to Hottentot woman 2 days ago. Just what you said. They got drunk. They found her by the track. A young girl, 14 or 15. They did it, and they left her. They're uncontrollable. They're not like us. They're fighting here for the money. We don't want people like that. What are you going to do, Smith? Her voice was low, but cut like a flail. There was a gust of laughter from the stoop, and he swung round. It's beginning, Susan said. Suddenly he made up his mind. Have you got horses? In the kraal, past the one with the gun. Can you ride bareback? Maybe. If I can get bridles on 3, where can I take them? Below the house is the river. Take them there. He nodded. Be ready. You'll know when to go. But don't stay in this valley or go towards Kimberley. They'll hunt you down. I know them. They carried coffee and rusks to the stoop, and she saw that it really was beginning. Something more violent than just the laughter, for Michael was on the floor dabbing at his mouth where he had been cut, she assumed, by a blow, and Joel was wedged between the Swede and the man with the scarred head. Bankston was laughing. He held out his hand and opened it. He was holding the gold chain which Joel always wore around her neck. The girl's face was flushed. You can have it if you can take it, he said. Please, let her alone. Michael was trying to struggle to his feet. One of the men caught him by the shirt and pulled him down again. Can't you see she's frightened? Susan said. They had a little, not much, respect left for Susan. Perhaps it was the look in her eyes that the coroner captain had once seen that held them in check. Bankston dropped the chain in his pocket. I will put it back personally later. Smith went down the steps into the darkness. Where are you going? Bankston said. To relieve myself. Don't do it near the house. You boors stink. Susan poured the coffee into enamel mugs, and each man laced his with brandy. Is that all you've got? The Swede said. You people eat badly in this country. Have you no meat? She shook her head. Savages were all alike, she thought. She remembered the captain and the other Coronas grilling the goat over the fire and drinking brandy before Captain took her to the wagon. These men were the same, First the brandy, then the need for meat, then the need for woman. Here you are, Hoffman. This is your sort of food, isn't it? Sweep back. The thorn German dipped a rusk in his coffee and tried it. Not so good as Zwieback. Bankston turned back to Joe. A pretty girl like you shouldn't be stuck away here. You should come with us. Maybe you will. We have 2 or 3 days to get to know each other. He opened his hand. The gold chain lay in his palm once more, but Joel sat still. Never mind. There are other games. Let me put it back. You have a beautiful throat. She tried to move away, but could not. As his hands went up to her throat, one cupped her breast. Don't, she said, and shivered. Susan knew that whatever was going to happen, it would be soon. The gun was lying in the living room. I'll fetch more coffee, she said. Stay where you are, Bankston said. We haven't finished this yet. She felt totally helpless, an old, helpless woman. At that moment, a shot rang out. It came from the direction of the cattle kraal. Bankston leaped to his feet. Smith! He shouted. There was another shot. Over there, came Smith's voice. Behind the huts. What? 6 or 7 riders. There was a third shot. Bankston ran down the steps, fumbling for his revolver. The other 3 grabbed their rifles and followed him. There are horses down by the river, Susan said urgently. Quick! They made their way swiftly down the far side of the house. Susan stopped once and heard the crackle of rifle fire. She wondered what they would do to Smith when they discovered the riders were only in his imagination. Nothing to what they would have done to Joel. She heard a horse whicker and found 3 tied where the old pump had been. In the intense darkness, she had lost touch with Michael and Jewel. Now she heard Jewel call Michael's name softly. There was no reply. And Susan, is Michael with you? She could hear the hysteria in the girl's voice. No. She tried to remember their movements. They had entered the belt of trees together. He was here, Jewel said. Michael! In the silence, they could hear the crackle of rifle fire as Smith acted out his charade. Suddenly, a tongue of flame shot into the air. It came from the direction of the old cattle kraal. The firing stopped, and Susan heard shouts. The fire blazed up, silhouetting the gun. She realized that the old thorn branches used to camouflage the gun had been set alight. They were dry as tinder from the summer heat. They saw a figure running towards them, brilliantly lit by the flames. It's Michael, Joel hissed. The firing was resumed, but this time the bullets came cracking into the trees. The men were aiming at Michael. Just then he tripped and fell. Joel screamed. She started forward, but he scrambled up and came on towards them. The fire was frightening the horses, and Susan fought to control them. There was a crashing noise to her right. She saw the artillery mules rush through the trees and vanish upstream. Then Michael was with them, and they were struggling to mount the saddleless horses. The crackle of gunfire was almost continuous, and the bullets were striking trees all around them. In a moment they were splashing across the river, and a little later were riding across the desert on the far bank. They rode fast for the first hour, hunched against the night sky, expecting to hear the crack of a rifle at any moment. But no one was following. At dawn they stopped at a water hole, and Susan said, "If it's been poisoned, there should be dead animals." They looked carefully, but could not see any bodies. They drank and let the horses drink. "What happened?" Joel said to Michael. "We were frightened." I set the thorn alight. I don't know that I did much damage, but The wheels were wooden. They'll have to be replaced. It'll slow them down. He turned to Susan. Where are we heading? For the village called Galilee. Then she said, It's dangerous taking sides. I know. You can't stop the siege. But I might have stopped the gun for a while, at least. She looked at him more closely. His face was very pale and his eyes were framed by dark smudges. The effort had cost him dear in strength, she thought. As they spoke, two Boers materialized from an outcrop of rock on the far side of the waterhole. They held their rifles with casual alertness, interested but hardly surprised to see three civilians in their night clothes. The war had produced many more dramatic incidents than this. Who are you? One asked. Susan explained briefly that soldiers had invaded her house and that they were making for Galilee. The Boer shook his head. I have orders to bring in stragglers. Come with us, he said. They rode for most of the morning. To the casual eye, the desert appeared to be empty. But on closer inspection, there was evidence of much movement. It was crisscrossed by horses' hooves and iron-shod wheels. Guns, wagons, and armies had passed this way. In the early afternoon, they were picked up by a commando of 8,000 Boers and escorted to an encampment at the base of a jumble of flat-topped mountains. As they rode into the camp, a horseman detached himself from a group. My God, he said, and Susan. It was Hans Lessings. Susan had never been so pleased to see the familiar square-bearded figure. Leaving out Michael's attempt to destroy the gun, she told him what had happened. He nodded angrily. What can I say? We don't like these people, but we need them. They know how to use the big guns. Come, you must be hungry and thirsty. Let me get you something, then we must go to the general. Where are we? Susan asked. These are the Magersfontein Hills. Look over there. Do you see the smoke? That's the British relief column. General Cronje was too busy to see them. Susan caught a glimpse of him, a burly, bearded figure in a wide-brimmed hat and a long tassed coat that came down to his ankles, reminding her of pictures she had seen of American road agents. They were seen instead by a vice commandant, who hardly listened to what Lessing had to say. He was the thin-lipped man, clean-shaven, which was unusual in the lager. After a few moments, he cut Lessing short. Take them to the family lager and tell them to stay there. The family lager was a camp within the big encampment itself, and was made up of wives, children, mothers, even grandmothers, who had chosen to be with their man. There were nearly 100 women and children, some of British stock, local farmers who had come to the lager for food and shelter. Their sympathies with the Boer army rather than with the British forces. Susan, who had been only on the periphery of the war, now found herself at its very heart. They were fed and given a tent, and when they had rested, she talked with other women, some her own age, and discovered that the British relief column had suffered severely at Boer hands in crossing the Modder River a week before, but that they were expected to attack the present Boer positions at any moment in their drive to relieve Kimberley. Lessing came for them towards evening, and they walked over the lager. It was sited below Magersfontein Hill, a large flat-topped hill shaped like the prow of a ship. They came to a rise. Look down there, he said. At the base of the hill, facing the British lines, Susan made out a line of trenches. They had been so cunningly concealed by acacia branches and karoo bush that they were almost impossible to see. "There are 15 miles of them," Hans said. "We have put barbed wire in front. The British expect us to be up there." He pointed to the top of the Margaretfontein Ridge. "They always fight in the same way. First they will use their artillery, then they will attack. You'll see when the bombardment comes." It came that night, a night of rain and high wind, with lyddite shells bursting on the cliffs above them, lighting up the night sky. The bombardment went on hour after hour until just after midnight it stopped. The wind died and the rain passed away. The prow-like hill was etched against the sky. All night the Boers had been moving into the trenches, and as the first hint of dawn began to seep across the veldt, Susan could see their heads and shoulders as dark patches against the lighted background. Then, as the light strengthened, she saw a sight she would never forget. Coming towards them across the open veldt, shoulder to shoulder, 9 ranks deep, was the Highland Brigade. It appeared to be engaged in a formal ceremonial drill, for she could hear faintly on the morning breeze the commands: close up, dressing, watch your dressing." 1,000 yards, 500 yards, still the solid mass of marching men came towards the Boer trenches. There was no hurry. Everything was calmly paced. Sometimes a man stumbled over a bush or turned his ankle in a moise-hound hole, and a voice would shout, "Dressing! Keep your dressing!" "My God, what can they be doing?" Michael said. The Boers in the trenches were equally astonished. The general had promised to set a trap for the British, but they had never expected them to walk into it quite so easily. "Close up!" The voices came crisply across the veldt. The light was shading from dark blue to grey, and Susan's eye could make out the kilts and sporrans of the leading ranks. Then someone in the Boer trenches, perhaps by arrangement, perhaps with a trigger finger taunted by tension, let off a shot. Immediately the Boers began the engagement. Flashes from the Mauser barrels in the half-light rippled along the trenches like a display of fireworks. The impact of the steel-jacketed bullets fired from the new high-velocity rifles, which could penetrate 3 men, one behind the other, was appalling. The front rank of the Black Watch disappeared from view as though it had walked into a hole. Even the poorest shot, and there were no poor shots among these farmers, who used a rifle every day of their lives, could not have missed, for the Highland Brigade had done the unforgivable. It had marched in close order on trenches it did not know were there into a hail of bullets. "Gather round, Black Watch! Gather round!" came a voice. Another was shouting, "Charge!" A third, "Retire!" Over all this came the skull of the pipes and the beat of the drums. No one knew what to do. The Black Watch in the lead began to move backwards and collided with the Seaforths. Men of different regiments found themselves stumbling into each other, running past each other, dying in each other's arms. Behind the Seaforths was the Highland Light Infantry. When they saw the Black Watch and the Seaforths come past them towards the rear, they too turned, trampling down their own colonel. Soon thousands of men were stampeding wildly across the open veldt. Dawn and a blazing sun showed what had happened. The ground in front of the Boer trenches was littered with bodies. Some were dead, some were dying, some were calling for water, some pulling themselves along on their elbows, trying to get to the rear. These were picked off by the Boers at their leisure. There were mounds of abandoned equipment, rifles, bayonets, water bottles, and on the barbed wire, totally unexpected, totally unlike anything the British had ever imagined, hung dozens of bodies. The storm of the night before had passed away, and the day grew hot, for it was midsummer. In the sunlight, the movement of a bayonet, or a flask, or a cap badge, or a button gave a telltale flash which brought a volley from the Boer trenches. Men were hiding everywhere on the stony, scrub-covered plain. Behind bushes and rocks, under blankets, behind dead bodies. There they had to remain as the sun climbed into the sky, grilled by the heat. Some became delirious and began to crawl towards the Boer trenches. They were killed before they had moved a yard or two, but hundreds endured until the Boers counter-attacked at noon. Then they fled. It was the worst catastrophe in the history of the Scottish Regiment. Scottish regiments. As dusk came down, water carts and medical staff came onto the field from both sides. There were few Boer casualties, and their doctors went out to help the British, so that many of the wounded from the lager. All that night Susan and Jewel bandaged wounds and set splintered limbs, and it was not until the following day that they could rest. They stayed in the lager for nearly a week before they were allowed to leave. Galilee had been burnt down in the British advance, so they could not continue their journey. There was nowhere to go but Portuguese Place. They reached the Green River in early afternoon and took cover in the trees on the far bank. Michael went forward, leaving the two women. He crossed the water and stopped in the trees on the home bank. Everything was still in the blazing heat. There was no smoke, no movement. The old cattle kraal was a black scar on the red earth. The gun was gone. Slowly he rode towards the house. A shutter flapped in the hot wind, but there was no sign of life. He beckoned the woman forward, and they crossed the river to join him. "The gun's gone," he said. "I'm sorry," Jewel said. He shrugged. "It was worth a try. They must have got new wheels. Perhaps the ammunition carts arrived." He looked at Susan. She was exhausted. "I'll go first," he said, and rode ahead of them to the house. Apart from the banging shutter, nothing moved. Now was the time they would kill him, he thought. They could shoot him from the house, and he'd never even hear the shot. But if the gun was gone, they were gone. It made no sense otherwise. He dismounted and climbed onto the stoop. The mugs they had used for coffee were still on the table. He felt again the rage that had left him weak and trembling when they had touched Jewel. The front door stood open. The house was empty. "Come up," he said. "It's all right." But it was not all right. In revenge for the attack on the gun, the artilleryman had left the house a ruin. Furniture had been smashed, cups, plates, pots lay strewn about, some encrusted with food. Susan's bed had been used. The bathroom was a fetid midden. One of the rooms had been used a lavatory, and the floor was caked with excrements. Something inside Susan seemed to wither. She stood, looking at her ruined home, unable to cope with the thought of what they had to do. There had been too many beginnings. Michael seemed to sense what was going on in her mind. "Don't give up," he said. "We'll get it right. No one is going to destroy Portuguese Place while we're here." A scream echoed down the passage. Jewel was standing at the window of her room, which looked out onto the part of the house which Jack had destroyed. A body was hanging from an old beam. It was Smith, or what was left of him. Crows had eaten away his face and his hands, and he hung there, a rope tied around his chest, turning in the wind, first one way and then the other. Don't let Grandma see, Jules said. Susan allowed herself to be put in a chair on the stoop. She heard a scraping noise and then the sound of a pick and shovel. She could not move, not even when she heard them go to work on the house. For the first time in her life, she felt defeated, not even when she had been taken in by the Bushman woman, nor when she had been alone on the banks of the great river, nor when the rinderpest had wiped out the farm, nor when Franz had lain in his room half paralyzed. Not even at those times had she felt so totally defeated as she did now. She was half aware of Michael and Jewel bringing in buckets of water, finding brushes and cloths and brooms, half aware of the sounds of cleaning, only half aware that they came out every once in a while to see if she was all right. Her mind wandered back through her life, back to her childhood in Georgia, and finally she fell asleep. When she woke, she was no longer on the stoop, but in her own bed between her own rough sheets. She could see her clock on the wall and the picture of Franz, which she kept at her bedside. It was just after dawn. She could not recall having been taken to bed. She did not even know which day it was, and for a second she was terrified she had gone through one of her lost periods. She knew that her mind had become fogged by exhaustion and by what she had seen at Magersfontein. But she felt better now, as though something in her brain had unraveled during the hours of unconsciousness. She got up and saw that her room shone with cleanliness. She went into the living room. Apart from one or two gaps where furniture was missing, it was as it had been when they left it. She tiptoed down the passage and looked in at Jewel and Michael. Both were asleep. The other rooms were empty. They had worked miracles. The house had been set to rights. She walked out onto the stoop and stood in the shade of the grapevine which Franz had planted. The sun was shining. Everything was peaceful. A ring-necked dove sitting on the roof of the house was calling in lulling tones. My father, work harder, work harder. There had been a moment on the stoop, she remembered, when she had nearly given in. She had felt that she had wanted to close her eyes and keep them closed forever. But that had passed, thank God. She walked down to Franz's grave and changed the flowers in the little jar and then came back skirting the old cattle kraal. For a moment she expected to see the great barrel of the gun, but there were only the black scars and the tracks in the soft sand to show where it had been. The farm was hers again. Not hers alone, but Jules and Michael's too. She recalled his words. No one is going to destroy Portuguese Place while we're here. A new day was beginning. The gun had been only a bad dream, but the gun was not a bad dream in Kimberley. Its presence there was changing everything. Oh, we got a lot to go through. Sheesh. I think I might call it for a day. Vista way. Yeah. Okay, I'll continue when I have a day off. It will be next week, I think. Yeah. So I know nobody's watching, but I will continue next week. Tuesday? No. Yeah, I think Tuesday. Well, That is it. Ciao, ciao.